my biggest offers were to lose fights. A guy flew out from Europe and offered me $80,000 to defend the title on the level. And then he said, well, our boy can't beat you. Anyway, he offered me $300 US, paid, and it was a lot of money back then. It was about $2.5 million today, probably more. He paid into a Swiss bank account, the combination given to my dad before the fight, said, I've done my homework. I know you've never been knocked off your feet. You don't have to go down. I could retire in the corner, so I had a busted eardrum. He'd get a doctor in there because I'd never been knocked off my feet and, just basically hand the title over, and I couldn't possibly do it.
No one's ever lucky. I think the only luck you get in life is where you're born, and then you make the rest.
Stick around. It's going to be a good ride. We've got his ring in. What's the go with this, eh?
It's Dan's.
Where's Dan?
It's better, brother.
Where's Dan? Because I don't believe in luck. The only luck you get is where you're born and you make the rest. Okay? So what's this guy doing?
He has the teeth on it.
Good chompers.
He looks like he's come straight from Burning Man with the top.
Yes, too. Oh, well,
for the people listening, we should point out, Hollywood's not here today.
He's not here today. He's going under to have a little operation.
Whereabouts?
I think it's near the hind quarter.
The hind.
I think it's on the bot. So we might need a donut for next week's episode.
We'll bring him a donut next week.
But we might get some sense out of him today.
I reckon we're a show.
Love it. All right, let's get into it. Welcome back to Australia's #1 podcast, everybody. We are the Little Fish, and we speak to the big fish about town each and every week. We talk development, property, mindset, business, life, bringing you guys as much value as possible. So please like, share, subscribe, whether you're listening or viewing, because you can do both. Please interact and get the algorithm pumping, Benny.
Bloody oath.
Let's get into it, guys. Today's guest, Australian boxing legend. Having carried the torch for Australian boxing through the 70s and 80s, he's held the IBF Super Featherweight World Championship from 85 to 87 after beating Lester Ellis in a 15-round war.
Ooh, yeah.
Dubbed as the fight of the century. Inducted into the Australian Boxing Hall of Fame, and he's never taken an 8 count in 60 professional bouts.
That's insane.
Tough as nails.
Yeah, it's insane. Chin.
That's tough as nails. Oh, that's chin.
That's chin.
That's chin.
Yeah,
Keep your feet.
Keep your feet,
son. They used to tell me that at footy.
My dad used to tell me that as well.
Keep your feet. Well,
I was like, you try and stay up on your feet out there, Dad.
Well, this guy keeps his feet, all right? And he may have pissed off the king of Lygon Street, old Alphonse Gangitano at some point as well.
Shit.
So there could be a story there. Today he's a motivator, commentator, boxing analyst appearing on SEN, Herald Sun, doing great things. Give it up for Barry Michael, everybody.
I'm Baz.
How are you, fellas?
Hey, buddy.
Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you, mate. Thanks for coming in.
Alphonse. Haven't heard that name in a while. So headphones just down on the other side, Baz.
Down this side, Baz. And you just stay there, Dan.
And maybe flip them around, Baz, so it's not cutting across you. Probably make it a bit easier.
That's all right.
You happy with that?
Yeah,
no drama.
It's gold.
Beautiful, mate. Thanks for coming in. How have you been?
Pretty good. Well, when I say pretty good, the last 12 months been pretty average because I lost my father just over a year ago, and COVID, I think, had a lot to do with it because I couldn't get to see him in the aged care facility. I had to speak to him through a window.
Yeah, of course.
And then my wife kept nagging me about a little thing I had on my lower left top part of my hip, and I finally went to the doctors, and they hit the panic button, did a test, and it turned out it was a malignant melanoma, so I had that removed. That was last year. And then prior to Christmas, after my 2 AstraZeneca shots, I was playing 8-ball with a mate of mine, and I was struggling to breathe. Up until then, I was still, prior to the last lockdown, I was still in the gym regularly, still training, still doing a lot of walking, and I really believe it was the second shot that triggered it. I ended up having trouble breathing and chest pain, and it turned out that I had 3 blocked arteries and had to undergo triple bypass surgery. So I got over that. That was November the 30th. I had that done. So I was out 6 days later and recovered pretty well. And then couple of weeks ago, I had to go to Sydney to do the fights up there. So what did I do? I bloody caught COVID, didn't I? And I bought it back and gave it to the wife as well, which she wasn't very happy about. And it knocked us around a bit, to be honest.
You've had a shit run.
Yeah,
But I'm pretty good now. I'm pretty well, got the all clear, so you don't have to worry about catching anything off me.
Good.
I'm sorry to hear about your dad, Baz. I remember when we met, if you remember, Pete, we met your dad.
Yeah,
Dad.
yeah.
He was an amazing man. He did 29 trips over Germany in the Lancaster Bombers. He had a remarkable story. And he was.
And he was your coach as well?
He was my.
Or advisor?
He was like my Rock of Gibraltar right the way through. Advisor, coach. He basically showed me how to hold my hands up. He had about 20 fights in the amateurs himself, so he had a bit of a boxing background. But he was always. He was always good enough to humble enough to let other people train me and teach me, but he was always there in my corner like the Rock of Gibraltar. He was my cut man, which I needed a good cut man, and Dad became
What's a cut man?
When you start bleeding.
Yeah, gotcha.
I mean, they put the thing on your eye and
Bit of Vass.
Yeah, Dad.
Vass.
I never was stopped on cuts, even though I was cut to ribbons in many fights, and ended up I had plastic surgery twice over my eyes. Since then, I've had a couple of other melanomas cut out, and I've had plastic surgery there. But I actually, during my boxing career, would have had 300 stitches over my eyes and plastic surgery on both, and I was never stopped. So
no knockdowns.
Dad, and never got
Kept his feet.
Kept his feet.
Had the shit beaten out of me a few times.
I heard you did a pirouette once.
I did a complete 360 after Jinsik joined Darwin, hit me with a left hook, and I did a 360 and stopped him in 4 rounds, and so had signed for 140 grand. Got on the plane with the promoter who was in Adelaide, and he said, he's lost money, but it's all good. He'll settle up with us next week in the lawyer's office. Never saw the prick again. Bankrupted himself and sent me a cheque for 5K out of 140. So that was painful.
Yeah. Barry, so the Barry Michael story's out there, and we want to obviously touch on it, but we want to get to the lessons and the advice that you've learnt in your long and decorated career. You're in the commission flats, and can you start us where the boxing started, where the passion started? You fought with your brother. You started with your brother. Where did it all start?
Well, but basically, Mum and Dad migrated from the UK when I was 2. We lived in Hamilton for a couple of years, and I got a bit of a recollection of Hamilton. But my first real recollections were at state school in Williamstown. We're living in the commission flats, and the commission flats, Williamstown now is a very expensive suburb. But back then,
commission flats with views.
Yeah, where we were, flat 1, number 99, we didn't have the views. The police station was just up the road. They were only 4 stories high. And they built those ones that are 12, 14 stories high, and they've got some of the best views in Melbourne. We didn't have the views, but they demolished them 30-odd years ago, and they're now like townhouses. You'd be happy to have one because you happen to buy one, it costs you $1.5 million, $2 million now. But at school, because Dad taught me to stand up myself. And, there was a lot of migrants in Williamstown then, English, Greeks, Italians, whatever, Croatians, all different types. So, and Dad taught me to stand up myself, so I got in scraps at school. And by the time I got to high school, I think the first 3 weeks in high school, I punched on 3 times. Back then it was all organised. You'd meet after school. It's a designated place.
Yep.
They'd form a circle.
Link arms.
And you'd punch on. I was sort of unbeaten, even though, again, I got the crap beaten out of me a couple of times, but they usually gave up. And so then, I don't know, when I was about 14, maybe nearly 15, we already had gloves, and my dad had taught me basics, and we'd been to a couple of gyms, and I'd sparred with friends in the courtyards at the flats. But when I was about 15, my older brother came home and said he'd been to one of the local gyms in Melbourne Road, in Williamstown Road, and he'd sparred there, and they told him and my brother could have done anything in any sport or anything, but he just didn't. Anyway, so I went down with him the next night, and I sparred a guy called Noel Vidakovic, Nabusha, who was a very tough guy, and I went pretty well with him. Certainly didn't get away with him because he was a bit more experienced than me at that stage. And the trainer, a guy called David, who I lost contact with him many years ago. He said, yeah, you can fight. And I think I trained twice a week for 3 weeks and had my first amateur fight at 15 against a bloke that had I think 8 or 9 fights, and I won on points. And I thought, this is me. And by the time I was about 17, I had this dream and goal that I was never going to stop until I heard the man saying 15 3-minute rounds for the championship of the world. That was my goal.
Yeah, right.
And how did that, were you inspired by someone else or like what lit that fire in your head?
Watching Johnny Famechon, but especially Lionel Rose. Watching Lionel Rose beat Fighting Harada. The two of them, became great mates of mine. And of course, Lionel's no longer with us, and Famo he's in the aged care facility now after that horrendous accident 20 odd years ago. But they were both my idol, but Lionel was the man that really inspired me. I just loved everything about him, to see where he came from. I didn't really realise the Johnny Famechon story, how he came from France with his father and all that. And, but he was one of my idols as well. But Lionel was the man. And by the time I was 19, I became one of Lionel's main sparring partners. And, years later, I remember one day we were sparring. I was about 19 and maybe 20, and they had the TV cameras there, and Lionel was like a cobra in front of me waiting to strike, and all of a sudden, bang, 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 3 jabs, and then triple left hook, right hand crack, hit me flush on the chin, and my mouth guard hit the wall 20 feet away. And years later, we're having a drink, and he said to me, didn't take me effing long to realise I couldn't effing hurt you.
Now, Baz, when you made that decision that you realised, or you thought of that dream about fighting for a world championship, were you just thinking world championship, or did you have to consider how you were going to make money and the business side of it back then?
Well, I was at school, and I did I did matriculation, UF, what's it called now? VCE.
VCE.
Yeah. Anyway, I did
a heart attack then. I thought he was talking about some kind of math equation. I was nod.
Year 12.
Yes, I get it.
I did my matriculation. I wanted to do economics, and that was my first choice. And I think physical education was one of my choices. And they offered me psychology at RMIT, and I thought, sugar, psychology. So I deferred it for a year, and I turned professional on TV ringside. I won my first 7 fights that year and won the best first year fighter, and that was it. I deferred it for another year, but I didn't really have any intention from then on. And by then I'd solidified the dream and the goal that's what I was going to be, was to be a professional fighter, and I was going to get to the top.
Barry, so you decided, non-negotiable, you were going to do it, and you were going to get to the top.
So belief,
and obviously you had a fair bit of talent there as well. But what about the hard work? What about the miles and training every day? Talk me through how much hard work you had to put in.
Professional boxing, it's not play fighting. It's really serious, brutal stuff, and you really have to put your body through it. But to be honest with you, once I realised what was necessary and what you had to do, I became to love the grind.
Yeah.
And I used to love the road work, and I loved the sparring in particular. I'd spar.
So you fell in love with the process, Baz?
The whole thing, but I used to love going to gyms. I'd go to gyms and spar. I'd go to footy clubs and spar even first leagues players, spar the whole team, half spar the seconds. Did that with Melbourne, did a few others. Mark Jackson actually cut my eye in a gym spar, and I was
Jacko.
I was punching the soul case out of him, and Garassi made a big deal of it, and so I challenged him at the Underground one night, said, let's do it on the level, and he said, no.
And he was mad too, Jacko.
Twice the size.
Yeah, he would have been pretty big too, yeah.
Big boy fought Ronnie Andrews twice. I used to spar with heavyweights a lot. I used to spar with anyone, and I just loved it, but the grind and the hard work, you don't achieve anything in life unless you put in, and you got to put in boxing. You got to put in 120% because it's
brutal, right? It's unforgiving,
and it's not just physical; it's mental. The mental side of it. And I was talking about this with Timmy Zoo last week, who got knocked down in his fight against.
Yeah, shout out Timmy.
Yeah, great effort.
What
Timmy,
a legend!
Great effort, Timmy, to get up in the first round, to be caught the way he was in round one.
On the other side of the world for the first time.
Flush on the chin on the big stage worldwide, and he gets sat on his backside in the first minute and a half of the first round, and it was a really good, clean shot to get up, and it took him a little while, round or two, to get his equilibrium back, but he just took over, and his work rate was phenomenal, and he beat a top-quality opponent, which I did think it was going to be his hardest fight, which it probably was. You know,
his odds, it sounds like his odds would have blown out after that.
The odds changed dramatically. Paul Kent, because we were doing the hosting out of Melbourne, whereas out of Sydney. Sorry, what am I talking about? Because I had to fly from just up the road from the Ivanhoe Hotel. My daughter's engagement on the Saturday night. I had to get up at 4:30 the next morning to fly to Sydney to host it out of Sydney. But Jeff Fennick and Ben Damon were ringside over there in Minnesota. It was like minus 10 degrees and down to minus 20. I don't know if I could have handled that. But it was to come back the way he did and to dominate a quality opponent was a great experience for him, and I think a great learning curve for him, but it just showed what he's made of. He's he's made of the real thing.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a little bit like we spoke about before we come on the pod, like boxing and fighting, which Benny's big on this. There's a lot of parallels between life and boxing. Life will knock you down.
Yep.
You got to get back up.
And that's why I love it. That's why I love it, Baz. That's why I love boxing, because those parallels are just unforgiving, but it's adversity.
It is adversity.
Like this kid, Tim Zoo's on the other side of the world. He's got one chance to, live his gen. This is his big moment.
Yep.
Gets knocked down in the third. Was it the second round? First round. In the first round, a clean shot.
Yep.
Straight down. Gets back up. Believes, digs deep, and fights through the adversity and gets it done. Like it's crazy.
It was great to see, and it's an inheritance from his father, the great Kostya Zoo. And as I said on TV the other day, everything that the zoo camp do, they're meticulous in. They study their opponents, they train to a T, they do everything perfectly, and do it hard.
Yep.
There's no shortcuts. And in boxing, there are no shortcuts. I've seen 3 boxers die after fights. One of them actually won the fight, was announced a winner on the stretcher and died in hospital that night. Oh. Johnny Owen was another one who I trained with and sparred with a lot in Wales. He died after the knockdown in the 10th round of a world title fight. And there was another one, I can't think of his name now, but he died on a show in Williamstown. He fought in Williamstown in the city under the old swimming pool where they had the ring in the water, and he collapsed in about round 4 or 5 and died that night in hospital. But so I've seen 3 fighters die. You can die in there if you're not mentally and physically prepared. You shouldn't be in there. And if you want to be a boxer or have a goal to do anything, you really need to give it everything you've got
and take the risk, right, Baz? Like that's what we feel like when we're talking, trying to inspire the people or the listeners at home to step off the line and to have a go. But, a lot of the things we hear is, they're scared of losing or failing. But would you agree that's part of the path, right? Like you lost 5 amateur fights.
Yeah.
Had you given up, you wouldn't be the Barry Michael that we know today and have lived this amazing life that you've lived. So it's about
exactly. And I mean, I lost a couple of fights on the road. I mean, boxing was relatively dead when I turned professional. TV Ringside had died. That had a few serious injuries, and that was off the. It was there for my first year until I got to main events, and then I went from, potentially fighting for good money back then, thousands of dollars for main events, for fighting in small halls for $250. My first 10-rounder was Andy Broome for $250 at the Marconi Ballroom. I won the Australian title in 1978 against Billy Mulholland, a mate of mine, Lenny Walsh, the late Lenny Walsh, who passed away a couple of months ago. His brother was one of my main sparring partners, Glenn Walsh. Lenny flew me up to Coonabarabran, which is right up in the middle of New South Wales, and I fought Billy Mulholland, who was a great boxer, Billy Mulholland. 15 3-minute rounds, I got $750 for it. But I won. That was the main thing. And I held that title for 9 years. I never lost it. It was one of my great achievements.
Yeah, 100%. Can we talk about the Leicester Ellis fight?
Oh yeah,
sure.
It's a big one,
because that's let's cut to the chase, and that is a big one, and it's been touted as one of the biggest fights. You're an underdog
Yep.
in that fight. You talk
The
about
old dog.
the old dog, 30-year-old. Lester was 20 years of age. And even, the money was coming for him. They were backing him. They didn't think he could get to the weight. Can you talk some about that?
And when you say they were backing him, I think there's some stories around who they are, who they.
I'm just saying they, all right?
I mean, no comment.
Fair enough. The story with Lester, I mean, as I said, I used to go around a lot of gyms and spar, whoever was available. And, when Lester was 12, and I was 22, I went to the Glengala boxing gym and I sparred about 8 young lads and, used to show them things and nurture them. And if they were good enough to have a crack at me, well, hit them a bit harder sort of thing and just keep them in line. But Lester, I got out the ring after sparring all these young lads and I said, what's this kid's name? And they said, Lester Ellis. He was 12. I said, this kid's a world champion. And then I became, good friends with him and Graham Brooks, who I also had to fight. Graham Brooks, Lionel's first cousin, who went to, I think, 19-0 before he fought me. And Lester...
Oh, you took his 0?
Yeah, I took his 0 and Lester's as well. But, with Lester, I was rapt to see him win a world title. I hadn't fought at that weight in a decade. And I said to my dad one day, I said, Dad, I'm going to challenge Lester. And he said, what, a non-title fight? And I said, no, I'm going to challenge him for the title. And he said, son, you can't make the weight. And I said, Dad, I'll do it. I'll do it if I have to do it. And I did it all correctly. I went to a dietitian. I had my fat content weighed underwater. And I found that I should have probably been fighting at that weight or even lighter the whole way through. And a month before the fight, one of Lester's crew, the late Alphonse Gangitano, rang me up and said, do you need more tickets? And I said, yes, I do. I said, but stop backing Lester. He said, no. He said, love yous both like brothers. Sure.
Oh, yeah, we'll get to that.
He said, I'm not betting on this fight. And I said, look, I know you are, Al. I said, he can't beat me. And it was true. 1 month before we fought, I'd actually did a trial weigh-in where I made 58.95, which is 9 stone 4, 130 pound, which I hadn't done in a decade, and I'd fought as high as about 143 or 10 stone 3. And so, a stone difference is a fair bit for someone that's fit and, in good condition. And I realised that at that weight I could still have the strength and maintain. They'd never thought I'd be able to fight the 15-round distance, but it was the best thing I ever did, and they fell into it. I didn't think they would, and anyway, as it turns out, I won a 15-round war with Lester, but it didn't start off well. I'll tell you, because before the fight there was, a lot of bad blood was built between the two of us, even though we're great mates today, and we were great mates as when he was coming up, and I was rapt to see him win the world title. But we came to centre ring, and he just started saying, because I taught him to talk to opponents too while you're fighting, because I always talk to my opponents, especially if you hit them a good one, and they go, that hurt you, didn't it, mate? A little bit sadistic, I know. But, anyway, we came to centre ring, and I just said to Lester, thanks for the title, Lester, and he just started saying, you're effed. You can read it as clear as a bell. He said, you're going down. I'm going to knock you out. And I called him. I said, listen, you young... I think a lady's sexual organ or something like that. I called him. I'm going to kick your effing backside tonight, and it was really bad blood. But when the bell rang, we came out. The very first punch Lester hit me with, which was one of his greatest punches, was the left rip, and it hit my right elbow, and it skidded under and hit me in the lower side of my abdomen, well below my ribs, and I felt something rip the very first, and it was like a knife stuck in me. Just the very first shot he hit me with. And
so that adversity.
Yeah, then the pain was gone though, and I got on with the job, and I forgot about it. But after the fight, I was passing blood, and it was the first time I ever did. But Lester, he passed blood for about a month after the fight. He was pretty beaten up. We were both beaten up. He broke my nose in round 12, and Joe Bugner was commentating with. Who was he doing it with? Tim Lane, that's right. And Joe Bugner in round 12, all of a sudden Lester smashes me with a big right hand, and by then you're beyond pain and you're beyond exhaustion, and I'm not feeling the punches, that's for sure. And all of a sudden I just realised the blood streaming down my nose and running off my chin, and I figured my nose is busted. And Joe Bugner picked it up during the commentary. He said, Barry Michaels has just copped a massive right hand. It looks like his nose is busted. The blood's pouring out of his nose. And, anyway, the bell rings and I go back to the corner. I sit down and Dad gets in the ring, and the great late Ray Styles, who got me in the best condition of my life, he goes, great round, 3 rounds, you're champion of the world. I said, he's broken me effing nose. He goes, forget it. And I'm looking for some sympathy. 3 rounds, you're champion of the world. I said, but he's broken me. That never happened in 56 fights, Anyway, I forgot about it, and it was no big issue after that,
And would it be fair to say Alphonse backed the wrong horse?
Oh, for sure. They were paying off for months and months.
Did you have your followers that got involved?
I had, there was the late Jackie Tucker, who passed away only a few months ago too. Jackie made a fortune on me. He used to come and watch all the sparring sessions, and he wouldn't say much, but he'd always back me. He won a lot when I fought Frank Ropus on Ash Wednesday. He won a fortune when I beat Lester. Yeah, he did. He backed me against Al Carter, which no one gave me a chance against Al Carter, who was 23 knockouts in 24 fights. So, there was guys that, in my circle that always had a quid on me, and one of them, the biggest punter of the lot, was Jack Tucker, the great late Jackie Tucker, the chicken man, who... a beautiful bloke, and he won a lot of money on me.
Yeah, bloody good. So you're world champion. And I think you went the 15 rounds. I think
went 15.
Watching it looks like you nailed him late, but it went the time, did it?
Yeah, it went 15 threes. It was round 3. He caught me with an uppercut. What happened was round 3, all of a sudden Gus Mercurio, who was the referee, stepped between us and warned me for punching low, and I sort of was in shock, and he said, box on, and Lester sidestepped me, picked me up with an uppercut and crashed me with this right hand, and I was in Disneyland, seriously. And he knew Lester was one of the had more killer instinct than almost anyone I ever fought, and he just bombarded me, and I experience got me through it, and I went to a show, and I caught most of them on the gloves and shoulders and top of the head, and he just bombarded me, and I hit him a couple of body shots while he was, bombarding me, and finally when he slowed up, I got up close to him and I said to him, that's the best you can do, you want to forget it, that was round 3, and from then on I started taking over, and as the fight progressed, I sort of got on top, and down the stretch, there was no doubt. And, if you watch the documentary, A Melbourne Story, a lot of people, because they show the highlights of Lester with his brilliant combinations and that, but it's only minutes of the actual fight. I say to people, watch the whole 15 3-minute round, because there might have been a few rounds I did lose, but the majority of them I won convincingly. And I think it was 5, 6 and 7 points on the judges' scorecard.
Was that 3 judges then, or was that
3
so
judges,
that wasn't the yeah.
It's the only way to do it. You need 3 at least, and even then they quite often get it wrong.
Yeah.
I've seen some horrendous decisions over the period of my life.
Do you think, what about, what do they call it? So anyone, I think I've heard stories before of people trying to get to you before the fight to throw the fight and stuff. That obviously happens?
Yeah, it happened to me. My biggest offers were to lose fights. I can probably talk about the first one, because 2 of them I can probably talk about. One was Lucky Gadalari. He was making a comeback, and I was offered 10 times what I was fighting for to lose that fight, and I wasn't interested, and I stopped him in 3 rounds.
And there was a big one. There was a big one as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, was that late in the career?
I was off as world champion. A guy flew out from Europe and offered me He offered me $80,000 to defend the title on the level. And then he said, well, our boy can't beat you, but he also can't make the weight, which, the limit was 58.95. The lowest he could make was 63.5. Yet he was European lightweight champion at 61.25. Anyway, he offered me $300 US, paid, and it was a lot of money back then. It was about $2.5 million today, probably more. He paid into a Swiss bank account, the combination given to my dad before the fight, said, I've done my homework, I know you've never been knocked off your feet, you don't have to go down, you can, and I had my left eardrum, I think, ruptured 9 times, and my right one about 5, I think, or 4 or 5. One stage I had to get an eardrum grafted in the left side because it wouldn't heal anymore, and thus I'm quite a bit deaf. But yeah, he said to me, you know, I could retire in the corner. So I had a busted eardrum. He'd get a doctor in there because I'd never been knocked off my feet, and you know, just basically hand the title over. And I couldn't possibly do it. I can understand why fighters do it, you know, for money. And I'd probably be a lot better off financially today if I had done it back then, but I just couldn't live with myself. So I'd never really considered it.
I would argue, Baz, that, yeah, you're lucky that you didn't do it because you've gone on to commentary and you're respected. You know, you're in the Australian Boxing Hall of Fame, and all of those things are worth way more than that short-term money back then. And
True.
How close were you, Baz? Because I'd like
it would have been hard.
Well, I'd like to think I wouldn't take it.
Yeah, me too.
But you know what I mean? Like, you
It
know.
was a lot of money, and you know, like I discussed it with my dad. I said, Dad, I couldn't do it. He said, son, you know, don't do it. You know, he said, money's not everything, and you know, your pride and you know, who you are is more important. And you know, thus I hate seeing rigged fights, and they do still happen.
Yeah,
there's a question in Trivial Pursuit: what's the easiest sport in the world to fix? And you only got to get to one person. Even the cornermen don't even know. You just need to get to
one guy,
two people.
Yeah.
And I've seen fights, you know, and I'm not going to mention any, but I've seen.
Do you reckon today still, Baz, you reckon there's still a bit going on? Well, of course there is, because wherever there's money in the
Wherever
big
there's
dollars,
high stakes and money.
Yeah, whenever there's that, you know, especially big money at top level now, you know, because you're talking about a worldwide betting ring. It's a lot different.
Talking about that and going back to the Leicester fight and say Alphonse Gangitano, the king of bloody Lygon Street. So he lost a lot of money, Baz. There's a famous story. Can you take us to the Lazar nightclub and what happened there, and you know why Alphonse wasn't that happy?
Yeah, well, Alphonse and I, we had a reasonable sort of relationship. I used to get along with him okay. Didn't really have issues with him. People don't know, but about 10 years before they jumped me in Lazar's, there was a punch on outside Mickey's disco, and it ended up my team against his team, and weapons were fired as well, but it was all hands were shaking, and I actually punched on with one of his friends who king hit me, and I beat the crap out of him, but that's another story. But there was no bad blood between Alphonse and I, and then he took over the career with the Cedar bus lines, and you know, he wasn't one of their managers, he was like their security guy, let's say, you know, their go-to bloke to, you know, when they needed, if someone stood over or whatever. But as I said, when he rang me a month before the fight and, you know, said, do you want more tickets? And I said, yeah. And he told me he wasn't betting on it. Well, I knew that was rubbish. And it wasn't until 2 years after, it was just before I lost the world title, I'd been living in England. I'd defended the world title in Manchester for my third defence. Came back to Melbourne, was still trying to get a fight with Lester Ellis. My manager, Frank Warren, wasn't doing the right thing by me, and I let him know that, to be honest, especially at a convention a couple of years ago in Miami. That's another story. Anyway, I came back to Melbourne and I went to see the Jeff Fennick-Tony Miller fight, and I got invited to about 3 or 4 different functions, and I made the mistake of going to Lazar's. I had my first wife with me, Sandy, and a young friend of mine, Simon, who was 21 at the time. And all of a sudden, and Alphonse was there, and we just sort of waved to each other, and I hadn't spoken to him in years. And he was on a table with another group of guys. I think I was wearing a suit or a jacket. And all of a sudden, a bottle of champagne come over, and the waiter said, this is from Mr. Gangitano, and he'd like to talk. And cut a long story short, we went and talked. He got a bit heated because I said I was always ready for a rematch. You know, I had so many people turn on me when I'd go out and say, give Lester a rematch. I always was willing to give Lester a rematch. Lester took him 35 years to say he didn't want a rematch, and he never would have beaten me.
But he kept that close to his chest back then.
He kept it close to his chest. Right. And, you know, so anyway, then I'm telling Alphonse that, you know, I'll fight him anytime. Let's get together with the other guys, my team, which was some colourful waterfront identities amongst my team, and we'll sort this fight out. And all of a sudden, my first wife started screaming, and I've turned around, and my mate Simon, he's unconscious, being carried out by the bouncers. One of Alphonse's friends is just king hit him coming off the dance floor, and I've turned around for the first time in an hour or so, and I was just surrounded, you know, by quite a few guys with sort of death in their eyes. And the first thing I thought was, I'm probably dead. because I know they carried pistols and whatever. And I turned to Alphonse and I said, "You effing so-and-so, you've set me up." And he just jumped me. And I went, back on a couch or whatever it was. And I never got off it, chair or couch, I can't recall. But they just beat the crap out of me. And Chopper Reed reckons he was there. I didn't recall seeing him. It was all a bit of a blur. If I was concussed that night, I was probably concussed ever in my career. My nose was smashed right under my left eye. It was smashed right across my face. He reckons they smashed me with one of those glass ashtrays.
Who, Chopper?
Yeah. And Alphonse actually latched onto my right cheek. He tried to bite my cheek off. And, I had ring holes all over my head. And I remember at one stage security, because they were still whacking me. And my wife, she'd been carried out by the security. She was outside and I was left to them. And there was talk about a gun that fell out of someone's hand or was kicked under the couch. The security, I remember one of them sitting on me, and I remember him saying, he's had enough, you'll kill him. I was sort of vaguely recall that. Then I remember him just dragging me through the crowd and blood spraying everywhere from my nose and mouth and top of my head and that. And we got to the front door and they just pushed me outside, and my first wife, Sandy, was out there with Simon, who's, sort of coming to. And I remember exactly what I said. I said, "Take me to hospital. I need to go to hospital, but I've still got the world title." But I didn't have it for long after that. 4 months later, I lost it.
Well, would it be fair to say, given that you're alive now, you didn't cooperate with the authorities when they came knocking?
Cooperate for sure, yeah. Well, to be honest with you, the police turned up at the gym, at Jack Rennie's gym, a week or so later, and they knew the full story. And I just said, "Look, I've had a dispute with an associate that I know, been blown out of all proportion," and I signed that. That's what I signed. Was it. Because there would have been repercussions for my family or friends if I. And I'm the code of silence. You don't give people up, and otherwise you suffer the repercussions. So it was part of my,
especially in that time. It's been that era. It's been documented, through all the Underbelly series and stuff. So when you were living through that time, and you were saying you had some waterside people on your side, what are they, painters and dockers? Painters and dockers, yeah, that's right. So in that time when you were living, did you understand or realise how deep and dangerous the Melbourne Underground and those guys like Alphonse were, or now in hindsight it all makes sense? Does that?
No, sounds like you're pretty fearless.
To be honest with you,
could throw hands. So
these guys like the Waterfront boys, they took Frank Robus to number 7 in the world or so, unbeaten in 8 years, got him sponsors, did a great job. And when we fought, I actually approached them to look after me. I was going to be stripped, so I went to the IBF convention and got up and gave my story, and they said to me, "You got to fight Rocky Lockridge." And to be honest with you, I didn't realise how good Lockridge was. I didn't really do my homework, and I think, to be honest with you, after the beating in Lazars, that was the end of me. Motivation-wise, I just lost the desire. I wasn't the same. I wasn't as dedicated. I drank more, ate more. Just didn't do it properly and struggled to make the weight big time. Take nothing from Lockridge because he was a great fighter. But I just think at my very best I could have beaten him. And my nose broke in the first minute of the first round against Lockridge, which was after having been rebroken and reconstructed.
Right. Well, Baz, I've got one for you. When you finished boxing, you're one of the very few boxers that didn't, retired and then come back. A lot of boxers come back because of financial reasons. How did you feel? How were you left financially? Were you in a good position? And mentally, did you know what you wanted to do, or did it take some time to figure out? And
to be honest with you, I wasn't in that strong a financial position. I was better off than the average bloke, but certainly not wealthy. We bought a house on Currumbin Creek up on the Gold Coast, my first wife and I, and for about 3 or 4 months, I went to the gym every day. I ran every day. I was still training for fights. I was still sparring. I'm thinking, why aren't I fighting? And I've retired, and, this desire had sort of gone, but it was still lingering there. Anyway, I got into selling advertising with some mates of mine for a while, and then I got into insurance and finance, and I end up with a good business before the recession we had to have and the divorce we had to have at the same time, which sort of, and then I had my first son. But at one stage I had about 4,000 square foot of office space in where were we? In one of the good suburbs on the Gold Coast, and employed about 13 or 14 people. Was doing a lot for MLC, Zurich Insurance, a lot of the big companies, and I wish now I didn't drop it, but basically the divorce we had to have and the recession we had to have sort of finished things. And so I came back to Melbourne with custody of my first son, Zach, who's about 33 now, and virtually next to nothing, and had to start again. And to be honest with you, I would have always come back and fought Leicester again, but there was never a legitimate offer. I would have fought Jeff Fennick, which I challenged Jeff for many years, and we're on good terms now, and that was never going to happen. And if someone, I'll be honest with you, I never had one legitimate offer. I did have a few offers, but they weren't legitimate. You know what I mean? And I wasn't even going to consider them. So consequently, since then, I've done many things. I've been involved in real estate sales. I've been, promoted fights. I've done a lot of commentary, and I've always got something.
Bit of property development.
I've got a bit of property dedevelopment, and you guys have helped me there. I'm actually working on a couple of big ones at the moment. I'll tell you about after. But, so I've always had something on the go. But I always would have came back and fought again if the offer was right. But I did get a few offers, but they were never legitimate.
Would you say boxing and the things that, boxing sounds like it left you with not a hell of a lot at the end, but would you say the mentality that it left you with helped you through the later parts of life of the stuff we were talking about earlier, getting knocked down, being resilient, not being, taking risks and all those things, Baz? Because it sounds like, you went into business. Not everyone does that. You could have just gone and got a job, but you didn't. So would you say there was some, there's some good lessons that maybe you didn't realise at the time that was part of your makeup that you got to take away from boxing?
Definitely took away from boxing, but also I think my father, to see what my father did, because my father was a very resilient man, and he ended up putting himself back to university when we were in the commission flats, and he got a degree, and he ended up with a very good job in the public service. Just my dad always inspired me and talked to me about, basically, achieving goals, and, I read a lot of things about it as well. But and another business I did get involved in, a credit to him, out of the blue, when I came back to Melbourne after, the recession and the divorce and all that sort of stuff, I was at home one day and I got a phone call from a Greek guy and he said to me, your father's a good friend of mine. I'd like to, Paul Zavdaridis, I'd like to speak to you about something. And I said, what is it? He said, it's an outdoor all-weather pool table, billiard table. So I went and met him, and his son, Charlie, who's a very good businessman, very good. We end up, cut a long story short, we all end up in partnership together, and we built, over about 15 years, we built a very strong amusement machine business with jukeboxes, pinballs, pool tables, and they used to make them at the factory. And I sold out that during the global financial crisis, which is something I still regret to this day selling it out, but by then the market had become that much harder. But I've been in various businesses, but I think boxing definitely helped me in so many ways. I mean, boxing can be dangerous, as I said, and you can see I've seen fighters that are punch drunk, even though it's a rarity these days because the medical rules are a lot stricter than they used to be, but it still can happen. One fight can kill you or damage you permanently, as in so many sports as well. But I think for the majority of boxers these days, the way boxing is run, it's just going to help them in life in general. And I think it helped me a great deal.
Yeah, because you got, like boxing, like you're into it, Benny, much more into it than me. But me sitting back, we talk to a lot of people, Barry, who sit in that chair. And boxing's this thing where it's like, all right, let's train. And then you both get on this platform. So you've got to train, you've got to outwork your competitor. Then you've got to actually have the balls to get on the platform,
take the risk,
and expose yourself
in front of the world,
and go, all right, well, I'm going to either find out one way or the other whether I'm going to win or going to lose.
Yep.
And some people don't. And then you get up there, and then you got this platform where, well, we're going to see who's done the work because or work or talented because because it's going to come to the floor and there's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser.
And you're going to take, and if you're on the losing end, you take the lessons, you go back to the gym, and you better yourself. It's pretty wild, those parallels.
And then you book in your next fight where it's like, all right, world, I'm back to see how I'm going to go again. So comparing it to like other people maybe in business or careers and things like that, there's not too many places where it's like, there's your ring, go figure out if you've done the work or not.
100%. And to me, it's like it puts it into perspective, right? So those ones that are sitting, whether it be at a cubicle or behind the hoarding and, not sure whether to take the step or the risk, it puts it into perspective and you go, look at this, like George Kambosos or whoever these guys are that are just really putting them, if they're risking their lives. They're doing it on a stage in front of friends and family. There's nowhere they can hide. They're taking the risk.
Their reputation,
the whole lot. And I look at it and I go, well, fuck, if they can do that, surely I can start a property development business. If it doesn't work out, I'll be okay. You know what I mean?
100%. Or I can hire that guy, or I can take on that job, or I can make that phone call to that person.
So you got to take risks. Yeah, I love those parallels, Baz.
Yeah, true. And you mentioned George Kambosos. What an example.
Oh, dude.
I was lucky enough to promote a couple of.
Giving me goosebumps, Baz.
I was promoted a couple of his earlier fights, and his father was adamant he wanted my ex-partner Brian Armatura and I to promote him in Melbourne. It didn't happen, and I'm just so happy to see the way he's gone, and his mental attitude is what it's all about. When he fought Teofimo Lopez, I really thought he could win the fight. I did my homework, and Lopez had beaten the great Vasily Lomachenko, who didn't really do much for the first 7 rounds. Been inactive due to COVID for 18 months or so, and turned out needed a rotator cuff surgery as well. So he lost to a guy that wasn't 100%, Lomachenko.
But he looked good. Teo did look good, though.
He did. But when I went through his record before he fought George, I couldn't see that he was this unbeatable fighter that they were talking about, and I knew the toughness that George had.
The mentality,
the fact that he can box, he can punch, he moves well, he takes a good shot, and I was just so rapt to see him win it. It was one of the greatest victories for an Australian.
I'm going to tell you a story, Baz. I have to tell this story, right? So I'm the same. I followed like he came off the Selby fight.
Yep.
It was a decision. The whole world, no one gave him a chance. And I remember thinking, not even the Australian media, like the mainstream media, no one gave him a chance, and he was about to fight. So he was about to attempt to do something that is in 100 years of boxing in Australia just never ever happened, which was the undisputed championships. So I remember I watched every interview, and I bought in. I believed him, and I felt like you said, no one else believed him, but he believed.
Yeah.
And he made me believe. So I remember the day the fight was on, my kids, and I'd tell them about it and stuff. And I'm always telling my kids, one of the things I try and drill in is, anything's possible, take chances, all these things that we talk about. And we're watching the fight, and the craziest fight you've ever seen, as you know. So the knockdown at the start. Oh, Georgie!
How good was that, though? When he knocks him down. He's a huge underdog, and he knocks Teofimo down in the first round.
Wild.
I couldn't believe he comes back to the corner, Lopez, and his father gets in the ring, and his father's not the sharpest tool in the shed. He's going, beautiful. Keep doing what you're doing. He just got sat on your
ass. The whole way through. He did that the whole way through.
Beautiful.
But how's this? So I'm watching the fight, losing my mind because it's the craziest fight. Didn't realise the back door was open. I'm yelling at the TV, right? I'm going, effing hit him, Georgie, hit him. Like I'm shadow boxing and shit. And my kids are like, what's going on? And they're watching and stuff. And then he wins.
Yeah.
And I'm like one of the most exciting sporting things that I'd sort of witnessed, sort of thing. And he gets on the microphone, and the way he spoke about he said, it doesn't matter if the whole world tells you can't do something. Yeah. If you believe you can do it, and if you work hard,
how good
anything's possible. And I'm sitting there going, see, kids, told you anything was possible. Anyway, the best part, Paz, I'm like anxiety, and I was like overwhelmed, and I'll go, all right, let's go for a bike ride, kids. So I grab the 3 kids, and we go for a bike ride. And I get back. The wife's standing out the front with the neighbours. She goes, did you just see the police? And I said, what do you mean? I thought they were messing with me. So the police, because I'm yelling, going, "Effing hit him, Georgie! Go on!" You know what I mean?
Thought something was happening.
Domestic violence.
Oh, wow.
The police have come to our house.
Wow.
Someone's reported domestic violence. And then the wife answered the door and had to say, oh no, he's not here. And then of course they don't believe her because they're thinking,
you've done a
I'm
runner.
touching her up.
Yeah.
No, so anyway, and then he's going, no, he was watching the fight. You didn't see the fight, and of course, yeah.
What a classic
what
that is.
story.
That's a good story.
But it is, and George, to your point, like, is there a better representation of an Australian sportsman? I know we've got a number out there, but George, just the way that he carried himself through all of that, and even after it, if you remember, Tio got on the microphone, downplayed, thought he'd lost and stuff, and he still stayed humble and still, stayed true to himself.
Teofimo Lopez is still saying he won the fight. He got beaten fair and square by a better bloke on the night. And, George has carried himself extremely well. He's become a bit of a superstar in the States. He's commentating for Eddie Hearn. He's commentating for, all these different shows in America. And now it looks as though I actually got a message from Eddie Maguire today that Friday he's got a press conference and it's going to be about George Kambosos. Looks like Devin Haney, I think.
Who you got?
Oh,
George, you get him?
I still think George can do it. Yeah, I think he puts on so much pressure and believes in himself so much, and he's proved that he can fight. He can prove that he can box. He's proved that he can take it. And Devin Haney's going to come to Australia. He's out of his comfort zone, and let's just hope George can do it again.
Come on, Georgie.
That'll be awesome.
And I'll make sure I shut the door when I'm watching the fight.
That's a good idea.
Get the sound insulation up, Benny.
Good idea.
Yeah, nice. And I guess the lessons that I've learned during just this time with you, Barry, is you got to outwork everyone out there, outwork your opponent, and you got to be driven and inspired.
Yep.
If you're mixing those things together, you can get somewhere.
Absolutely.
Certainly sets you up for the future in life, I think, as long as you go about it the right way. And there's no doubt about that for sure.
Awesome. Great, guys. Well,
you're a legend, Baz.
Good on you, fella.
Yeah, you're a legend,
mate.
mate. Thanks.
Really appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming in. All the best moving forward. Dan, thanks for your input, mate.
This is your best episode, Dan.
I think it was probably his best episode yet.
Absolutely.
Hope the
Some of the
operation
best
goes well.
questions.
Had something similar happen to me about 20 odd years ago. Wasn't a lot of fun, but
You haven't got a donut we could borrow for next week.
So you can sympathise.
no. But you'll need one.
Hopefully he's back next week. That's it, guys. Thanks again, Barry. Heaps
thanks,
of value in there and heaps of takeaway lessons. Thanks for listening or viewing, however you're consuming us. Please like, share, subscribe, comment. Tell us how much you loved it. Thanks again, guys. See you at the top.
Thank you. Good stuff. Thanks very much.
Legend. Thanks, Buzzer.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barry.